Hello, everyone. Before we get started, we just wanted to let you know that there will be spoilers in this episode. You've been warned. Let's get on with the show.
Grab some popcorn, take your seats, and turn down the lights. It's time once again for the Movie Files, with your hosts, Steve Winall, Stephon Walker, and Dave Wright.
All right. Well, welcome to our first official video podcast of the Movie Files. My name is Dave Wright. I am accompanied by my cohorts in crime and punishment, Stephon Walker and Steve Winall. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey. So we have been friends for quite a long time, and we all share the same thing in common, that we love film, we love movies, we love TV, we love all consumption of media, and so we spend way too much time discussing it, and we thought, why not put on a headphone and speak into a microphone about it? We thought that, considering what's going on right now in the world, we thought our first topic to discuss would be the genre of the pandemic / outbreak / zombie film genre.
Just in case somebody's listening to this in the year 2047, in 2020, this year, we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. So that's what encouraged this idea, and we are very carefully making sure that we are doing what we're supposed to. We're social distancing.
We are all trapped indoors.
Yes.
So what we thought would be good to do is to within that genre that we've chosen, we each picked one movie that we wanted to sort of focus on. We realized that we're going to break off and end up talking about several more, but wanted at least one that we were going to be kind of focusing on each. So we tasked the others with making sure they watched them so they were as knowledgeable as they could be. I am going first because the movie that I chose is probably the most mainstream of the three. It is the movie Outbreak, starring Dustin Hoffman, Morgan Freeman, Cuba Gooding Jr.,
Rene
Russo, and a very young Kevin Spacey.
Yes.
Wasn't as well known at the time, but
And a very young Dr. McDreamy, whose name the actor.
Dermot Mulroney.
No.
Patrick
the other
Dempsey.
Patrick Dempsey.
Patrick
yes.
Dempsey. What? Dermot? Who's Dermot Mulroney?
They're all the same person.
All those guys from Young Guns.
Yeah. But yeah, Patrick Dempsey.
Patrick Dempsey was sort of the reason it all got started, I guess, right? And
yeah.
Yeah.
And that damn monkey, the monkey from Marcel from
Friends. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I believe same monkey. Yeah.
Did not know it was the same monkey. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Highly trained monkey. I think that monkey's probably got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame at this point. I would not be surprised.
He deserves it just as much as so many other people who...
Or there was a Patsy Award. There used to be a thing in the Oscars called a Patsy Award that they would give out to animals.
I didn't know that.
Like there were various animals that played Lassie that won it. The dog from the Brady Bunch won a Patsy one year because
Muffin?
it was...
What was the dog's name? I'm trying to remember the name. Was it Muffin?
Maybe. It was the same dog that was in the movie A Boy and His Dog with
Oh, no
very
kidding.
young Don Johnson. Yeah.
Wow.
You'll find that in most of these episodes, I'll be the one picking the mainstream one because I tend to not see as many of the obscure ones as my fellow film fans. So Outbreak was one I chose. It came out in 1995. It was directed by Wolfgang Petersen, who did, I believe, Das Boot, Air Force One. Did he do one of the Jack Ryan movies? Did he do
I'm not sure.
ones with Harrison Ford?
Patriot Games, Clear and Present Danger.
Maybe I don't know. I might be making that up. But anyway, Wolfgang Petersen is pretty well known back then, especially as an action director. If you do want to stream it, it is currently on Netflix for you to watch. And we mentioned all those stars. Do you realize, not at the time, but you have a film that has 5, 6 Oscars amongst 4 different people? Because you've got
Donald Sutherland.
Yeah, I was going to say, did Donald Sutherland, is he an Oscar?
He's never won. I think he's been nominated.
But, I mean, it's an amazing cast.
Yeah.
Yeah, Cuba's won, obviously. Hoffman's won twice. Morgan Freeman's won once, and Spacey's won twice. So that's 6/4, which I thought was kind of amazing.
Yeah.
The cast was very, very strong. But, basic premises, there's by a confluence of different events, this monkey from this, I don't know, some fictional area, Motaba or something like that.
Motaba, Africa.
Yeah.
Motaba Valley, Africa.
Ends up getting captured.
They're capturing animals that they can sell, presumably, I guess not even necessarily on the black market, but they're selling it for animal research facilities in the United States.
Right. So anyway, he gets up, getting picked up by McDreamy, Patrick Dempsey, who decides he's going to try to sell it, and they end up, he takes it over to a pet shop, and the pet shop owner ends up not taking him. And in that exchange, the monkey scratches the pet shop owner, which is where one of the strains, because there ends up with 2 strains of the virus, and then he leaves. Now Patrick Dempsey ends up taking the monkey, releasing him, and at some point, the monkey, spits out some food or something in his mouth.
Spits some water into his
randomly, gave him a loogie and a wet willy, and then released him. And then that's sort of where it kind of branches off, and it kind of goes in 2 different directions. Hoffman's character, along with Cuba Gooding and Kevin Spacey, are they're not with the CDC. I believe Rene Russo is. They're
part of USAMRIID. They're part of the U.S. Army viral response team. It's actually based here in Fort Detrick, Maryland.
Actually, yeah, they did.
Frederick.
They I don't know if they shot in Fort Detrick, but it definitely said that. I mean, the location was supposed to be Fort Detrick.
When this movie came out, I actually had the pleasure of being in Frederick. I saw it for the first time in a Frederick movie theater, and this big, huge, grand, sweeping music came up, and you see the opening shot. And it's like Fort Detrick, Maryland, and the whole audience just started laughing because it was such this powerful, intense, full of foreboding moment, and everybody in the audience is just like, "No, that area is a shithole." Come on.
Nice.
But they're part of the Army's bioweapons division, I guess, or their response team to it. I guess they're not creating bioweapons; they're learning how to deal with it. But then again, they are. Turns out they are.
Right. So and Hoffman's character, Rene Russo's character, are they were married. I don't know if they're just separated or if they're officially divorced.
I think they're supposed to be divorced.
Yeah, I think
they keep referring to her. They keep reminding him that she's his ex-wife.
That's his ex-wife. That's right. So there's animosity, but still something there, obviously. But Hoffman is a renegade and never, doesn't follow the rules and all that.
He has a history of sounding the alarm and being wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Except, wasn't it? There was one time he was right about something really big, and then. So basically, he's the M. Night Shyamalan of infectious disease reporting. He had one big hit and then failed miserably several more times, and then finally got it right again.
And then the twist is it's airborne.
He sees dead people too. So
that's right. That's right.
A lot of dead people.
So the outbreak comes out, and what you have is the good guys, the Hoffman, Cuba Gooding Jr., Spacey, Russo, trying to figure out what's going on. It all ends up the center of it ends up in this small town, right? Mm-hmm. Cedar Creek, I think it is.
Yes.
And the bad guys, the black hats, are Donald Sutherland is sort of the big bad in it, and then you've got sort of the guy just underneath him is Morgan Freeman's character, who he's conflicted, but he's kind of teetering that line, right? He's sort of friends with Dustin Hoffman's character, but
he's also used to following the orders of his superiors.
Now, I have a question though. In the beginning, they discover, they've got the virus. There's all these people there. The military is there. This chopper flies in with 2 guys in complete hazmat suits. You can't see who they are. They leave, say they're going to drop supplies. Another helicopter comes in, everybody's all happy, and then it's a bomb that destroys, incinerates everything, hopefully including the virus. But the 2 guys in the hazmat suits, as they're leaving, they're talking to each other. One of them's definitely Donald Sutherland. I wasn't clear, was the other one supposed to be Morgan Freeman's character?
Yes.
Yeah.
It was. So he's not a good guy.
Not a great guy. No.
He knows what they did.
That was weird for me, seeing Morgan Freeman playing a guy who's not a good. I mean, I can't
He's
remember.
sort of morally ambiguous.
But he kind of leans towards bad for a lot of the movie, and
For most of the movie.
I'm just not comfortable seeing Morgan Freeman as a bad guy.
He was in the movie. What was it? The
Street Smart.
no, the one where they've got magical powers with gunplay and Angelina Jolie and
Christian Bale, Equilibrium.
Wanted.
Wanted. Oh, that's right. I forgot about Wanted.
James McAvoy.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman's the big bad in that.
Amazing that there's actually more than one movie about magical gunplay.
Yeah.
His first film was Street Smart, though. He did that with Christopher Reeve way back in I want to say it was like the mid to late 80s. That was sort of because his big brand, I mean, you remember where he really started was
Glory,
was the Electric Company. He was Spider-Man.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
That's why you think he's a good guy, because he was Spider-Man.
I didn't realize he was Spider-Man. I know, excuse me. I believe it was Spidey because they didn't have the rights to use the full name.
Yeah, that's right.
No, I didn't realize that was him. I knew he was in it, but I didn't realize he was in the costume.
No, it just proves Stan Lee's point. Anybody could be behind the mask.
That's true.
So you've got these sort of two factions working against each other. In fact, Hoffman wants to go to Cedar Creek, and Morgan Freeman ends up, trying to direct him somewhere else. He disobeys the order and ends up conning some low-level officer into letting him on the plane to go to Cedar Creek. So anyway, there's sort of this battle of they're trying to keep hidden what they already knew about. The infection is growing out of control because they have two strains of the virus. They actually had antibodies, right, to handle the first strain because of what happened back in the 60s,
but also because they created it. They actually specifically they weaponized that strain.
That's right.
And then the government had a cure for it so that they could use that if it was ever deployed as a weapon.
Gotcha.
But they didn't for the second strain.
With the second strain, which is the second strain is what happened to the pet owner, right? So the pet owner, the scratch, is what started the new strain. McDreamy's loogie was the original.
Right.
Yeah, there were two strains carried by the same host animal. Was the
which
idea.
I'm not sure is possible. I didn't look that up, and I know viruses certainly can mutate quickly. I don't think I've ever heard of a single host carrying multiple strains of a virus. So I don't.
Theoretically, it's possible, but I always kind of felt that was one of those things. Probably not, but it's the kind of thing where that's one of those details I'm willing to suspend a little disbelief as far as the narrative of the movie is concerned.
Oh yeah, I was just, when I heard that, when they said that, I was like, I don't know if that's a thing. But
when I originally watched the movie, I thought it wasn't necessarily two strains, even though they said it. I in my mind, it was like, oh no, it mutated.
Which would have made more sense and a lot easier to explain. But as we find out later on in the movie, they're not necessarily that dedicated to accurate science. So
yeah,
it's important to note that it's a Hollywood film.
100%.
They took something, and one of the things I think they did a good job of it was they really did try and tap into why you should be afraid of this, because it's an invisible enemy. And as far as Hollywood is concerned, as far as mainstream movies are concerned, that's a difficult thing to try and wrap your head around. Hollywood films, big budget films, love a clear-cut enemy. And the enemy in this is an invisible virus. But they do a really good job in this movie of making you feel afraid. You have these people show up to the village wearing these hazmat suits. You see people the whole village is dead. You see people who have literally been melted by this virus. You see Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character freak out and pull the mask off. And of course, that everybody's like, oh my God, we have to isolate him now. And, they have the moment when they're in Fort Detrick in the level 5 or 6, whatever it is, containment room. And you realize one of them has a tear on their hazmat suit. And that's, it's like, oh my God, that could have been horrible. They do that throughout the entire film of making you realize that what they are dealing with is something that is so deadly, you can't even be in the same room with it because it will kill you.
Yeah.
And I think that was a very effective way that they were able to direct the film.
So I saw the movie in theaters when it came out and enjoyed it fine. Watched it a couple days ago and didn't like it as much. Didn't actually think it was all that terrific because it was very 90s and it was an action movie, which I don't think you need when you've got a virus. Contagion, which came out in 2006, I watched that the next day. same basic premise. There are no action scenes. There is no villain other than the virus. And Steven Soderbergh, the director, did an amazing job of making it terrifying.
I agree.
If you touch anything, it's just the most normal things could kill you. So I don't disagree with what you're saying about it, about them doing a good job of making you understand how dangerous the virus is. Where I disagree a little bit on it, I guess, is that it is possible to do that without having to make it an action movie. That you can have the invisible villain and still effectively make it scary.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you're right. It is a product of the times, for sure.
Yeah,
Very
but
much.
I don't think, I mean, I agree with you that's the angle they took, but that's just a different take on it. It's like looking at an outbreak, a pandemic movie and making it a zombie film or making it, an art house film. I mean, there's ways to do it in different ways. I think this was mainstream, but I don't know. Sometimes I feel like mainstream gets a bad rap just because a lot of people like it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
Definitely. And I'm not any of my objections to it are not because of its popularity.
Right.
Again, I think part of it is that it's very 90s. So over the past couple decades since then, I've seen this kind of movie again. So going back and watching it, it was like, okay, this has become cliche now, looking back on it.
We've had 25 years of doing that story in different ways now.
Yeah.
That's a question I have for you, Steph, because I think this is maybe where you and I specifically maybe differ in how we view stuff with movies, because I tend to, and not right or wrong, this is how I view it.
No.
When I watched something or experienced something at a certain point in my life as a kid, as a young adult, whatever, I enjoyed it at that time. It almost like it brands it into me, like burns it into me and imprints forever, kind of in that way. So by the same token, like you might, I'm sure, look at something that we saw as kids, right? Like I thought Gremlins was super scary as a kid.
Yes.
I watch it now and I can, my adult self can appreciate the fact that it's not the greatest movie, but I still have this affinity for it because of what it made me feel when I watched it. So, stuff that I'm seeing a little bit later, maybe not as much, but I remember really enjoying it.
Right.
And so
right.
I kind of look back at it when I watch it as something that's like nostalgic. Now, with you, when you watch stuff, I feel like, and I've known you for a long time, but like you watch stuff and you want to be surprised. Because you've seen so much stuff that I think that stuff that you can figure out.
Yeah.
Frustrates you a little bit, because if you can see it coming, then you're kind of like, well, I saw that coming.
Yeah. Two things with that. Yes, to that. I don't like watching something and feeling like, well, I could have written this, because if I can figure it out, then, pretty much anybody could figure it out.
Right.
So I do I like when things go in a direction I'm not expecting. And at this point, at my age, I've seen so much stuff that gets harder and harder to do, because, there's only so much you can come up with that nobody's ever done a version of before. And that's on me. In terms of the nostalgia thing, I have a combination of both things you were just talking about. I can watch something that I loved when I was younger and still remember how I felt when I saw it and appreciate it. But there are some of those things where I watch it now and I'm like, wow, that was a really bad movie. But I was 7 years old when I saw it, so I really loved it. That experience of loving it is still there. It's just, same thing you said, I can look at it now and go, that wasn't that good. Other things, interestingly enough, there's some stuff, particularly from the 70s, since the pacing of movies has changed so much, I can watch something that I really enjoyed from the 70s or early 80s. I watch it now and I'm like, oh my God, we get the point. We understand. You have set up the premise. Please move on. So it does, I can't divorce who I am now from watching it again, but it does not erase for me my appreciation of it before.
Mm-hmm.
And something like Outbreak, it's been 25. I only saw it once. I saw it in the theaters.
Yeah.
So I didn't remember much about it at all. My memory of it was, oh, this is a movie about this pandemic. And going back into it, I'm like, oh no, this is an action movie. And the MacGuffin is there's a pandemic. And then there were things in it that, from a storytelling point of view, bugged me a little bit. It's a little bit lazy to me. If you go through the sequence of how this thing spreads, it's different. We were talking previously off screen about Andromeda Strain and how they set up everything so that there's no possible way that this virus that they have contained can escape, and yet things go wrong. So that's more that I like that, because that's hubris. It's like, we've got this. And like you said, very Michael Crichton, nature overcomes. Outbreak, it was more like every single fuck up that could happen that would cause this thing to spread happened. So if everything hadn't very conveniently gone wrong at the right place, it never would have gotten to where it did.
On that note, though, I think they did that same thing in Contagion, in the movie Contagion.
I felt like they did it more realistically.
Well, yeah, that's, I think, what made Contagion such a scary movie, is that it was hyper realism, and it really followed. I mean, you do follow all the way down to patient zero, and if memory serves, the movie actually kind of
it ends on patient
backwards.
Zero.
Yeah, it ends at the very first moment that the infection happened.
Right.
So you go through this whole movie not knowing how this global thing started, but it ends with you finally seeing that flashback and seeing the moment when it happened.
Right.
So they do kind of have all these absurd little events that happen, and you realize just how fickle everything is when it comes to a pandemic. And there's a great show on Netflix called Explained. It's very like little 15 to 20 minute episodes of easily digestible things. They'll just take one topic and then they'll just explain it to you, hence the name Explained. And they did one on pandemics, and they talked about the SARS epidemic that happened, that mysteriously just petered out. Apparently the virus mutated and it was no longer as virulent as as it was when it started.
Yeah.
They did the very much the same thing that these two movies did, which is that they plotted the trajectory of it after they did a bunch of investigation, and they showed the spread of it all the way from patient zero up. And it was insane, some of the things that happened. There was one guy who came down with it, and he did very much what everybody's telling us to do right now with COVID-19. Just shelter in place, quarantine yourself, don't go out, don't do anything. And so he did that. He isolated himself in his apartment building, in his apartment, had a severe case of diarrhea, which got into the pipes, somehow aerosolized into the ventilating system.
Wow.
And he infected every person in every apartment around him for the next 3 floors.
That's crazy.
And by the end of the month, everyone in that entire building was infected with it. And one of them had already gotten on a plane to Canada. And it went to Canada, and suddenly all of Canada started getting the infection, and then just suddenly it stopped. So I think a lot of people don't realize just how much of a bullet was dodged back then.
Right.
But now we're seeing it COVID-19, where it's exactly that kind of thing. The transfer rate is something that's so bizarre and so fickle, and just, and these movies, Contagion, I think the movie Contagion did a really good job of showing how that happens. Outbreak started to. They wanted to just give you the bare skeleton of it to show that, this is the process that the CDC and USAMRIID goes through to try and track these things and to fight it. And then, of course, it became an action film.
Right. But the main thing we want to figure out, though, with just being real for a minute with COVID-19, we need to trace it back and find out who in Wuhan, China had the shits.
What apartment building they were in.
Right.
And
but yeah, comparing, and I'm not meaning to crap on your movie choice. I did enjoy Outbreak for what it was, but just kind of the things that I'm saying bug me, or kind of like comparing that they felt like they needed to make it a dramatic thing to spread, and that actually took me out of it because it's not necessary. It's like you've got, like in Contagion, you've got this guy shook hands with this woman who blew on somebody's dice, and then he coughed in a movie theater, and it kind of spreads like that, as opposed to this guy got his mouth spit in by a monkey, and then that monkey scratched somebody, and while that guy was being scratched, another monkey stole the monkey's banana, and then somebody using completely inappropriate lab procedures reaches into a spinning centrifuge.
That's the biggest breach.
That was pretty horrible. Yeah.
Well, I was saying, does that speak more to the time? Because like we keep talking about how
I think it does.
I feel like it got better and better, but you even look back at like 80s and 70s movies, they really felt like they had to spell it out for us like we're idiots.
I agree.
There's another great moment like that McDreamy gets on the plane to Boston, gets off of the plane, is clearly very, very sick, and immediately starts sucking face with his girlfriend.
Yes, and then falls over,
Right?
almost dead.
It's like, and I'm
Yeah.
sorry, if my significant other has just stepped off a plane and looks death warmed over in like the flop sweats and clearly feverish, is like, I'm not locking lips with that.
And she even
No.
said it. She's like, "Baby, you look terrible. Let
And
me
then
suck on your
kissed him.
tongue." I mean,
Right. It's bizarre. One thing I'll say that I thought they did, one angle, especially as I rewatched it, that I thought was actually really interesting is that they did show us, they gave us one kind of point in time in the movie, one scene that was basically showing us from the point of view of one of the infected.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I've been wanting to talk about that scene this whole time.
You know
Yes.
what I'm talking about? The
Yes.
mother and wife.
It's my
who's-
favorite part of the movie. Yeah, please continue.
Well, yeah. So
and
I
actually,
mean,
I think the coughing in the theater actually was Outbreak, wasn't it?
That was
Wasn't
Outbreak.
Yes,
Contagion.
yes.
Okay, so
yeah,
yes. All right.
mix the two.
So
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, so there's, you know, as they've decided now, they brought in the you know, the armed forces to kind of lock down the town. There's a crazy scene, which I will say was ridiculous, where the yahoos in the pickup truck, they're like, "Follow me, we're getting out of here," and then they're going down.
Yeah.
I did think it was funny when I will say it was funny when they shoot at the guys in the helicopter and they look at you like, "Did he just do that?" Like,
Yeah.
What are they
yeah.
doing?
yeah.
Yeah. That was right. It's like, yeah.
I was like, what? But so now they're showing kind of like the seriousness of it with the town. They're telling people, okay, you know, you'll be fine. It's just they're kind of, their actions aren't lining up with what they're saying over the loudspeakers. They're kind of like, it's just a cold or whatever. I forget what they said
Right,
exactly.
right.
But put a white sheet on the front of your door and we'll come get you and you'll be fine. Don't worry. We've got it under control. So the mother, you know, it's a family, it's a husband, wife, 2 kids, I think. Wife's, you know, she's got the symptoms, obviously, pale
All
face,
nameless
whatever.
characters.
All nameless characters.
Mhm.
We don't even ever know their name.
Yeah.
And she basically says, don't worry, I'll be fine. They come and they get her and they're saying goodbye. Like at one point, I think one of the kids wants to give her a hug and, you know, she's like, no, don't come near. And I thought for no-name actors, I thought they actually really did well with that.
Mhm,
Great.
mhm.
And then, you know, they show her going into the, you know, the truck and going to the tent to get tested. They show her getting tested. They then go to a scene of, I think it was Spacey, random scene talking to, I think, Russo about something or Cuba Gooding, and he's looking
He's
at different
testing all
things.
the samples.
Yep, and
And you
it's
see
her
the number that's,
Yeah, it's like 113 or something, and it was hers.
216, I believe.
Oh well, we'll have to fact check
I
that.
didn't even notice.
And
I'm
then
probably wrong, too.
yeah, so it's like positive, and then it pulls up hers, positive. So now you see that. And then the end of that kind of arc is her in a body bag, obviously dead, zipping up with several others being thrown into a barn and
Mhm.
torched.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a pretty powerful section that
You
they
saw the whole arc of the illness from start to finish.
Yeah.
correct.
They did something similar in Contagion that I liked for the same reason with good. I've just forgotten the actress's name. Who's
Kate Winslet.
Thank you, Kate Winslet. She's one of the response team. She goes, she's interviewing people. She finds out she's sick. She kind of gets worse, and at some point, a couple of scenes later, you just see her body wrapped up in plastic with like duct tape around the throat.
Oh, the last moment of her in that movie when they're all in like this airplane hangar, all on just cots, all these people just dying from
yes,
this illness. And this one guy saying, I'm so cold. And you see her like with no energy left, like take her jacket off, I think, and try and hand it
Yeah,
over to the person and it just falls out of her hand.
Yeah.
She basically just dies trying to give her jacket to somebody else. And it's like, oh, really effective.
So one of the things I found about Contagion that I really liked is it really predicted a lot of what's going on for us now. It was much more, the virus was much more virulent than what we're dealing with, and it went on for longer, hopefully, than this one will. But otherwise, the government response, the medical response, the way that it was spread, the way that people were responding to there being a sickness out there, it was very much like
There's even, I think there's like a false cure that's put forth at some point in that movie.
Yep.
As well. We're seeing
it's
all that stuff right now.
yeah, it's some, what was it? It was it's like some essential oil kind of thing. It's like a plant extract or something. I can't remember right now. But yeah, and I mean, you had Jude Law is kind of the low rent, which is a weird comparison, low rent Alex Jones of the movie, where he's the one who's spreading all this conspiracy theory and saying that that the government's lying to us, and that he's taken this cure, and it turns out that he was never sick to begin with, and he was selling this cure. And yeah, it's really kind of uncomfortably predicted what we're going through now.
Yeah, I think it's important to note too that while we're doing this topic of pandemic movies and everything, it's we don't mean to be triggering anybody that's going through it right now, because it's important to note, I think, that everything we're talking about is kind of extreme fictionalized versions of this. While Contagion is the closest thing, I think, in as far as film is concerned, to what we're actually going through, that even that is sort of a heightened reality.
Very.
Because it's a fictional illness in that movie, and all of these things spread in very, like, Outbreak, for example. If you break it, one of my favorite things to do is to break things down to their log lines, meaning if you could sum up the entire film in just one or two sentences. I think Outbreak, the idea of it would be, what if an Ebola-like hemorrhagic fever spread like the flu? Because Ebola and any kind of hemorrhagic fever, that basically means it liquefies your organs. It's so bad, it literally turns you to mush.
Right.
In a very short period of time, within the course of like a week, maybe only 48 hours. And if those things were airborne, they're usually just bloodborne, but if they're airborne, imagine if COVID-19 right now was Ebola, if it spread that fast, and,
right.
It would be a much worse problem.
Exactly. And this was killing people like in 48 hours, like you said.
Yeah.
They'd get it, they'd be dead a couple days later. So no, I don't.
And for the way the movie made it seem, it was 100% fatality rate, right? I mean,
yes. I believe so. Yeah.
You get it, you're dead.
And something that's important to note about that's not outside of the realm of truth either. There's a great book called The Hot Zone, which is it's kind of sensationalized, but it is a nonfiction book, really. And it talks about the various strains of Ebola and like hantavirus and things like that have been discovered, and specifically the mortality rate of them. There was only one that was ever 100% kill rate, and that was only something that showed up in monkeys. There was it actually happened here in Virginia. A testing facility with lab animals.
I believe it was the hantavirus, I think.
I thought it was Ebola, but it was a specific
strain. It could be.
Strain.
It's been
Reston.
a long time.
It's Ebola Reston is what it was called, because it was Reston, Virginia, where this happened.
Right.
It was the only one that had a 100% mortality rate. There have been some that have been in the high 90s. But yeah, so hemorrhagic fever, really, really awful type of thing. And that's what Outbreak was specifically dealing with.
No, I don't, yes, absolutely don't mean to imply that the disease in the movie is anything like what we're dealing with. I just found a lot of the reactions and the procedures to
very
be
accurate.
Very similar, even down to, you've got somebody who's really concerned about the cure, and you've got somebody from the government going, whoa, how much is this going to cost? And it's like, that's not the priority right now.
Yeah, that's so far down on the list, it doesn't even warrant discussion.
Right. Yeah, no, I certainly hope none of the discussion that we're having is in any way upsetting for anybody who's had to deal with this.
Well, we are kind of asking for it.
That's true. Oh, I forgot one other person that has a small scene in the movie, but very memorable. Character actor J.T. Walsh.
I remember J.T. Walsh in it.
Yes.
He has a scene. He's the second.
It's like the chief of staff.
Chief of staff of the White House, and there's a scene.
Oh yes,
where
of course.
He's talking to them, and he's just like,
"Great scene."
It's great, right? It reminds me. It's like Alec Baldwin and Glengarry, right? It's like just a short 3-minute scene, but it's empowering because
commanding,
right? So part of that scene was it was after that whole arc of the mother who died, because you remember he takes a whole bunch of pictures. And he goes, I want you to look at these. These are real people, flesh and blood. And he throws it out, and it lands on like a shot of
her face. Yeah.
Of her face. These are the people of Cedar Creek, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And I think what he was trying to say was, I'm not saying not to do it. I'm saying that if I'm going to do it, I don't want to hear anybody that's going to tell me this shouldn't have happened.
Right.
That person was, of course, Dustin Hoffman's character, because he was, the voice
left out of the meeting.
He was left out of the meeting.
Right.
Yeah.
That
was a wonderful scene. We should mention that, Steve, you have a connection because Dale Dye was in that movie.
Yeah, let me indulge my ego.
I loved his moment at the end though, where he gets to take Donald Sutherland away. Just that
the
little smile on
glimmer.
his face.
Yeah. So I have a 1 degree of separation from this movie, and actually I've got a couple connections. The Motaba Valley village from Africa that was filmed in Kauai, in the island of Kauai. So I've been to that set. That village is still there. But no, but Dale Dye is the Colonel Briggs, I think his name is in the movie. He's Donald Sutherland's right-hand man.
Right.
He's got sort of running operations there at Cedar Creek. Is played by actual retired United States Marine Captain Dale Dye, who of course trained me. I went through his boot camp for the movie Last of the Mohicans, and he has been in a great many films since. If you see any military thing involving Steven Spielberg or Tom Hanks, Dale Dye is involved with it. Anything with Oliver Stone, Dale Dye is involved with it. So yeah, it was great to see him in the movie, and it was a great part for him. Dale Dye's story was that he retired voluntarily from the military in, I believe, 1983. It was right after the big, huge bombing in Beirut that killed all the Marines, because those were his men.
Wow.
And he sort of retired out of protest to the American military for the policies that were going on there. But he found himself with nothing to do because he'd been in the military for 25 years. Since he was 17 years old, he lied about his age to go to Vietnam because that seemed like a good choice at the time. Did 3 tours there. But he wound up with nothing to do, and then he decided he was just going to go see a movie, and I think it was Rambo, the First Blood Part 2, and he looked at this movie and he's like, how is it he can get into a helicopter and press on the thruster button and fire a rack of missiles? These people don't have any idea how the military actually works. So he decided he was going to try and work his way into the military, or to Hollywood, to try and teach them how the military actually functioned. Heard about this young upstart guy named Oliver Stone, who was apparently making the quintessential Vietnam movie, cold called him out of nowhere and very boldly said, if you're making a Vietnam movie, you need me. And Oliver Stone, himself a Vietnam War vet, decided to actually take a chance and listen to this guy, and they had lunch together. Now they're great friends. Dale Dye was in the movie Platoon and was the consultant on it, but this is a long tangent. Yeah, but that's his whole story.
Cool.
But great to see him in Outbreak.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, again, Hollywood movie ends, they find the cure, they have a couple helicopter chases, which obviously happens in these types of movies.
Always.
And also, don't forget the ultimate sacrifice that Hoffman makes when Rene Russo gets infected. He takes his, he knows there's a cure, but they haven't actually synthesized it yet. So he takes off his mask.
Right.
Because he wants to put her hand on his face.
Yes.
Well, that's also the declaration of knowing that they're about to bomb the town.
Yeah.
And so that's basically him saying, I'm going to stay here no matter what. So it's either the virus that's going to kill me or it's the bomb that's going to kill me. But either way, I'm going to be right here with you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. They did what I was talking about, them playing fast and loose with science, that they did finally find Marcel, the original monkey host. And somehow, in almost no time at all, they were able to take his antibodies and create a functional vaccine with it. In
Serum, not really.
It was. You're right. It was a plasma derivative treatment, but at any rate, it was pretty fast.
It was very fast.
Surprisingly effective.
Within minutes, they had the cure.
But yeah, whatever. It's a good. If you want a '90s action movie that's about a pandemic, it's a perfectly good choice, I think.
Yeah,
we've often joked about doing a Movie Files episode where we just talk about our favorite last lines in movies.
Yes.
I got to say, this movie, Outbreak, has a pretty great last line.
I don't remember it. What was it?
And Dustin Hoffman, you see Rene Russo waking up and looking a whole lot better and realizing, oh, this cure has worked. She's pulling out of it. But they've also sat there the whole movie sort of repairing their relationship through this crisis.
Right.
And Dustin Hoffman looks down on her and says, do you think maybe you could take another chance on me? She replies with, sure, now that I have the antibodies.
Yeah.
And that's the last line of the movie. It's like,
I did not remember that.
That was pretty
That's
clever.
a good line. That's a good line.
That was pretty clever. She's got the immune response to Dustin Hoffman now.
So we're going to move on now to Stephon's choice.
Yes.
Movie. Stephon, what did you choose for us?
I watched a movie called Pontypool. Now, as Dave was implying, I do kind of like watching. I mean, I looked, when we decided we were going to do this, I looked at a list of movies that were pandemic movies, and I specifically wanted to find a zombie movie that the vector was a pandemic. So I looked up lists of stuff and went through some of the descriptions. I wanted to find something I hadn't seen before. And I do like watching I like watching the things that are a little off the beaten path. So Pontypool takes place in Canada. Everybody.
I'm gonna real quick before you get into it. I will say because I'm the most recent. I just watched this last night.
Yes.
And as I'm watching this movie, I'm constantly going, "Of course, Stephon picked this movie." This is so Stephon's like sense of humor. Just the whole whacking. It was just it was. I mean, and I'm not saying it was bad. It was.
Yeah, no, it's not great.
No, but it was like kind of campy in a fun way and like just really cool. And I'm going to let you talk about it, but like, I just have to say when I was watching it, I was just like, yeah, I get it.
The funny thing is I had never seen it before, so I didn't even know that. I was just like, this sounds, here's the basic premise. A DJ, he's a washed up DJ. He is starting a new job at this small station in the middle of nowhere in Ontario. Almost the entire thing takes place within the recording booth. So it's very much kind of a locked room thing. The conceit of this movie is that it is a virus, but rather than being spread by biting or contact or anything else, it's spread by language, which is weird. The whole thing it was a screenplay by Tony Burgess, and he adapted it from his book called Pontypool Changes Everything. So the overall premise is that this guy is trying to figure out, he's a DJ, so he's talking, and you don't see the virus spreading. One of the things I really liked about this is that it's supposed to be sound-based. It's transferred by talking, so it's sound-based, but then also you are experiencing this virus spreading and this zombie apocalypse occurring in this town.
Through the ears of the characters.
Right. So it's our experience of it kind of mirrors how it's being spread. You only very rarely see these zombies. And one of the things they did that was interesting is when they made this movie, at the same time, they also made a radio play out of it, which was released separately in the UK. And watching it, I'm like, this could very easily be turned into a stage play because it really only has one or two sets you need. You could make it so it was one set. I should probably mention for people listening or viewing that all three of us are actors. So, and stage and other media actors. So that was immediately what I thought about it when I saw it. Was like, this is a stage play. This would be so easy to do. As this gets spread, you hear there's a guy who's supposed to be their weatherman. Ken is their eye in the sky. But you find out from this character's, the DJ's producer, that Ken is not only not in a helicopter, he's just sitting in his car on the top of a hill looking down over the town and just giving everybody the impression that he's in the helicopter.
Playing helicopter sound effects.
He's supposed to be giving the weather, but he's like, something weird is happening at this doctor's office. And people are gathering, and all of a sudden the side of the building just bursts out, and this wave of crazed people come out of it. And you spend the entire movie, first of all, trying to figure out why this is happening. The DJ's producer, as I said, is there, and there's also a tech girl, an audio tech. Give me 1 second. I'm looking up the names of things because I cannot remember. So the DJ is called Grant Mazzy. It's Mazzy in the Morning. He's kind of a low-level shock DJ. He's already gotten himself in trouble someplace else and been fired, and that's why he ended up at this place. Middle of a snowstorm. They're isolated, and they keep hearing that things are getting worse. And what they're hearing is that people start repeating words, and then they start not making any sense, and then they start attacking each other. Going back a little bit, there was one moment I really liked earlier on. As I said, in Ontario, so they also have French speakers, and they get this broadcast in French, and they translate it, and basically the translation is, stay inside, don't talk to people, don't use just kind of casual language, don't use affectionate language, do not translate this message into English. Because you always want to give the warning, the most important warning, at the end of the message.
The very end, yeah.
Yes. I enjoy the movie very much up until about the middle. And then it makes this hard left into a completely different type of genre that just doesn't make any sense. The doctor's office, where the people burst out from, the doctor from that office all of a sudden shows up at the radio station. Dr. Mendez climbs in through an open window, walks into the booth, starts talking to them. They all seem fine with it. It's like this guy just showed up out of nowhere, gets on the radio with them, and he just starts spouting all his theories on how this virus is spreading. Everybody's just like, he gives no evidence of it. He's just, oh, it's language, and it's only in the English language, and it has to be a word that people understand. And once they understand the word, it gets stuck in their head. So Dr. Mendez comes in out of nowhere, explains what's going on, and then a few minutes later, a couple scenes later, leaves through the window again. And he was only there to explain that this thing is transmitted by language. I did some follow-up to try to find out more about the movie. Apparently, the director, he said that they used to, in the old like 1950s disaster movies, there would always be this trope of an expert showing up out of nowhere, explaining everything and then disappearing. And he wanted to do that, which is fine, except it was a completely different feeling than everything in the movie up to that point. Everything in the movie up to that point was very serious, and it does a good job of building tension. And to have this semi-comic character come in for a couple scenes and then disappear really throws off the entire track of the movie. One of the things that was interesting to me is that this was it's not that it infects them with a disease and they catch this disease and they turn into the undead craving brains. Once you have this language virus, you stop being able to express yourself. You can't talk normally. You start repeating yourself. You can't think of the words. You start saying nonsense when you're trying to talk, and it drives you so insane that you become violent. And they just start attacking each other and losing their minds and trying to eat each other, which I thought was really interesting because I years ago, I had a relative who was in the hospital. For some reason, his glucose dropped so low that he started having aphasia and could not say the words he was thinking. And so he'd be trying to talk and completely the wrong words were coming out. It was total nonsense. And you could see him getting really frustrated, that it's like, I know exactly what I want to say, but I can't say it. And my basic ability to communicate has been taken away from me, and this is driving me nuts. So this was taking that idea to a huge extreme, which I thought was very interesting since, the whole thing was language-based. They solve it by realizing that as long as you can't understand what a word is supposed to mean, if you think of a word as meaning something else, that overcomes the virus, and ultimately people get cured that way. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense either, because how do you just stop understanding what a word means?
Well, didn't Mazzy cure?
Yeah, her name was Sydney.
Yeah.
Sydney, the producer. Yes,
I actually like that scene where they turned the word "kiss" into "kill," and she says, "Kill me."
Yes, no, that was
a nice moment, actually.
Like I said, this is a high mediocre movie. It's a very interesting concept. It wasn't a great movie, and I think maybe if they had cut out that whole Dr. Mendez section and done something a little different, it could have been a better movie overall. But they did have some really nice moments, and that was one of them. Somebody who had been into the studio earlier came in infected. They didn't know it. It turned out later on that she was still in the building, and they didn't know that, and they ended up having to kill her. And this is why Sydney starts kind of perseverating on the word kill. And you can see she's trying to talk, and all she can really think of is the word kill. And they did do I thought it was good writing too, where Mazzy is trying to kind of reprogram her on the fly. And it wasn't that very typical style of writing where it's like, I'll try this and that didn't work. I'll try this and that didn't work. Oh, the third thing, that'll work. He struggled. He was like, okay, it's this thing, it's that thing. Try to, he had to work before he finally came up with Kiss. And Kiss was, the way they played it, I think the actor did a really good job too. The way they played it was it was just a random thing that he said. And he was like, okay, yes, kill means kiss. And you could see it worked on her, and it kind of reprogrammed her. And similar to with Outbreak, it comes a moment where the government is going to bomb the entire studio, because at this point, the infected have pretty much all congregated around the studio. And so just before they're supposed to destroy the studio, Mazzy gets back on the radio and he does this big long monologue about, changing the way you think, and that this word means that. continues with the thing he did with Sydney. And meanwhile, in French, you hear the military outside over a loudspeaker counting down. And then just as it gets to one, the movie ends. During the credits, you hear VO of radio and TV things, and you hear people talking about their experience during the virus, and then you hear governments from other places, and it's very heavily implied that they didn't contain it in Pontypool, that it spread someplace else. There is a post-credit scene. The post-credit scene is very strange. Mazzy and Sydney, they're still alive. They survived this whole thing. He's dressed like a spy, and she's dressed like a geisha girl. It almost looks like a Tarantino movie. They're talking kind of nonsensical. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you're watching it. One of the theories that I read, which works, I don't know if it was the director's intention, is that they're kind of improving, that as long as they just say whatever comes to mind and go with the flow of whatever they're saying, then they cannot catch the virus again by latching on to any particular meaning. And that's where it ends. And then maybe there's going to be a sequel, because they say they're going to, go off and have these adventures.
They're going to knock boots in the free world.
That's what it was. Yes, of course. Another great last line. To sum up, it was an interesting movie. I liked a lot of the things that they tried to do. I think it really, that middle section with the doctor, for me at least, it really took me out of it enough that kind of affected the rest of the movie for me.
I agree that was a weird spot. Yeah,
it was weird. And it wasn't like Vanilla Sky or Dusk Till Dawn, where there's this sudden genre change. That for me, in both of those movies, I liked it. It worked for me. In this, it did not work, because it went from being very serious to being this weird kind of not really funny, but
campy.
Apparently was supposed to be funny thing, and then it tried to go back to what it was before.
I have a question. So yes. The Sydney character, so she ends up, I guess, with Grant. So now there's something between them, and then they go off on these adventures, if we're to believe the post-credit scene. But right. Doesn't she have kids?
She does. We're not told whether her family survived, because when she's on the phone with her kid, it's clear that her kid has been infected.
Right.
And I guess her family's been infected, but maybe they didn't survive, or maybe that just was not handled properly.
Okay, maybe I missed that part. Okay, all right.
The movie definitely had some problems. And it was a really ambitious choice to try and do the infection in the way that they did. And this is something that was actually a criticism from a lot of critics that I saw talking about this movie. But I really appreciated the fact that it was a slow burn, that they took their time getting into it, that they really set it up, because then you feel the tension sort of creeping up on you and gradually building in intensity. I think a lot of movies they have this idea that you have to open with an action sequence to grab people right off the bat, or they're going to check out. And this movie doesn't do that. This movie takes the stance of like, no, we're going to take our time setting this up and do a really slow burn. And while a lot of people had a problem with the pacing of that, I thought it was effective. I happen to be a really big fan of what I call locked door dilemmas or mysteries or horror movies that are all contained in one spot. I think that adds a level of tension and mystery to it that you wouldn't otherwise get if you've got a bird's eye view of the whole thing.
Right.
And this is absolutely the opposite of that. This is, you don't know what's going on. And I am also a firm believer that what you cannot see in movies is always far more terrifying than what you can.
Definitely.
And this movie does a really good job of that. I think I have to give it props for that.
I would 100% disagree with the people who said the pacing was bad. It was a slow burn, but they did, like you said, they didn't have any huge action thing. But I mean, it starts out and you hear Mazzy talking and you just see the voice waveform on the screen. So that already is interesting and intriguing. And side note, they had the original conception of the movie was that the whole thing was going to be that. You wouldn't see anything other than the waveform.
Ooh.
So that, I don't think that would have worked, but it was an interesting idea.
That would have been really ambitious.
So you see that, and that's like, okay, that's interesting. And then as he's driving in the dark through a blizzard, and he pulls over, and all of a sudden this woman out of nowhere shows up, and she's talking about blood. and then disappears. And then there's some world building, and then you hear Ken, and then there's some more world building, and then you hear something else. So I actually think, while it was a slow burn, I think the pacing was excellent because they didn't let it get boring. They let it had a waveform. Actually, it kind of, there were times where it spiked and dropped and spiked and
Genius.
dropped, but they kept it going. So I would agree, it was definitely a slow burn, but I would not say it was boring. I wouldn't say the pacing was poor.
Yeah, no, and you could tell they were going somewhere with it, and it was deliberate. Sometimes you'll see something that's slow, and it's just like, I can't. This is interminable. I can't deal with it. But this wasn't necessarily that. It just was. You're almost like, okay, let's go, let's get to it. You know what I mean? Because I know it's coming, right? And I think that a lot of that just had to do with the fact that I was like trying to get it seen so I could participate. Yeah. You guys had said, you both mentioned like the less is more approach they took with what they showed, and I think that's, I always trace that back to its origin with Jaws. How they did that, which, as we all know, the story legend of that is that that happened by happenstance because the mechanical shark didn't work properly, so they kind of they had to improvise. but I would almost say that I would have liked even more of the less, if that makes sense. There was the one scene where they got in, and there was the one girl, I have her name, Laurel Ann Drummond. She was a veteran, and she was an assistant or an intern or something there. She got infected.
She was their audio tech. Audio tech and answering the phone. She was there.
Yeah, so she ended up getting infected, which was fine. I liked that part of it, but then having the part when they're in the booth, and then the whole people are coming in. Like, I liked when they went outside and they saw it, but we didn't see it, and they came back in. I could have done without them showing the people coming through, and then all the people that were up against it when they were like,
I agree with you
in the booth. But they did a good job with, everything. I thought that for the most part it was good. But
I I agree with you. I think it would have been absolutely fine to only see what'd you say?
Laurel Ann, I think. Caroline.
Yeah, to only see her get infected and what happened with her. Because that tells us what's happened to everybody else.
Yeah.
They didn't, I would agree, they probably didn't need to have that massive people come in because the threat was there if they were outside. They didn't need to get in and then have them figure out a way to get them out. The movie could have worked perfectly without them.
Let me throw this out as a plausible thing. What if, let's just make this one tweak. So let's say the scene where they come out and they look outside, because they look outside because they're like, this isn't real. I'm going to look out, right? They're going to look outside.
Well, Mazzy loses it, and he's like, I have to see this, which was another thing that was really cool, is that, again, it was that we believe what we see, but we can't necessarily believe what we hear.
Right.
Yeah, and he believes people are messing with him.
Yeah. So
that's his whole motivation.
So what if at that point you hear the doctor is coming towards this, so you don't see anybody else, you just hear him, wait, let me in.
Yeah.
He comes in through the front door. He's like, shut it, close the door. Because he came in through this weird, like, cellar, those windows that are like in like a basement or a cellar. It's like that.
The other reason that the whole Mendes thing didn't work for me is, how does he know that it's transmitted by language? How does he know that this perseveration of words and the inability to form thoughts isn't just a symptom of some very normal viral infection? I mean, it all comes out of nowhere and unnecessarily. So I would have, if he had not come in and left through the window, that would have taken down some of the goofiness of it. But I still think it would have been better. We don't need to know. I agree. All we need to know is that the characters that we're dealing with come to the conclusion that it's transmitted through language. Then they proceed as if that's the case. We don't need some vague authority figure to come in and give us this harebrained explanation. I just thought it was bad scripting.
Yeah. No, well, I thought the thing that made it really work was just the idea of them getting the whole thing peripherally.
Yeah.
If I could go off on a total tangent here, not even a movie. This is another outbreak type of movie, but World War Z. Now, World War Z, zombie movie, zombie pandemic outbreak type of thing. But the movie, of course, very different from the book.
Yes.
I thought the movie was a perfectly acceptable PG-13 action film. Now I want the movie that the book actually promised that we might get. There is one chapter, and one of the things I love about this book is that every single chapter is a completely it's like a bottle episode of what's happening in this outbreak in a different period of time in this 10-year window of this pandemic and different parts of the world. And there's one whole chapter where it centers around this teenage boy who's living in Japan. I believe he's in Kyoto. And he gets involved in some online chat rooms and stuff where they're tracking this pandemic, where they're tracking the infection rate and what's happening in different parts of the world. And he becomes a part of this system that's disseminating information. And people actually start relying on it because he's a part of this big network that's just gathering information from things and sending it out into the world over the internet. And Pontypool had kind of that feeling to it. He was getting information in and just putting out what he had.
Yeah.
He didn't really know anything more than anybody else did, but that was his function. That was his one function in this thing, was to try and get whatever information he could get out. That, I thought, was like Pontypool was sort of headed in that same kind of direction. It was like, they don't know what's going on, but they're playing a vital role here. They are an essential service. They're disseminating information. And I would have been happier if I think it just stuck with that narrative. If it just kept it that simple, that in and of itself was more than engaging enough.
I'm also a fan of stories where you don't have the omniscient character. You know, especially if it's a situation like that where they're secluded and they only are getting little bits of information. I don't want to know any more than the characters know. And I don't want the characters to know any more than they should know. So I would have been, what you're saying, I mean, it's basically the same thing you're saying. I would have been fine without ever knowing. I don't need all the answers. I wanted to experience what they are experiencing in the same way they are.
And I think that's one of the reasons that like found footage films are effective.
Mm-hmm. Although a lot of them do fall into the trap of having some source where they find out vital
They do,
information.
yeah, but specifically the movie Cloverfield comes to mind there, where you don't really find out where this creature came from, or what really is happening. You just get the little bits of rules as they are encountered, and that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
And that would have been fine.
And you know what? That's funny. You said Cloverfield. That just made me think of the one that they did that was the sort of, what was it, an official or unofficial sequel, 10 Cloverfield Lane?
It was supposed to be in the same universe.
Same universe, but that is another one that's really good as far as
Love that movie.
You don't know what's going on outside, and a phenomenal performance by John Goodman. Where can people see Pontypool?
That is an excellent question. It is it's available from iTunes. You can buy it. I think it's like $3.99 or something. Or the entire movie, start to finish, is available on YouTube. I did not watch it on there, so I know when I found that and sent you guys the link, there were subtitles. Were those hard-coded subtitles, or were you able to turn them off?
There were subtitles in the because I watched it on YouTube actually.
Okay.
YouTube.
Yeah, so you can watch it free as long as you don't mind subtitles in a language that you may or may not.
It didn't
speak.
take anything away from it. It actually added this interesting element considering what the movie was.
Yes.
And about how it was language that spread everything.
So moving on to our final film choice, Mr. Winall, why don't you reveal that? Drum roll, please.
Well, when we first started talking about pandemic movies, because I'm a huge nerd, I sat down and I made a list of every possible film that I could think of that might fit that genre, because it's not a typical Hollywood genre. So obviously a whole lot of zombie movies end up making this list and I think that is one of the easiest ways for us to sort of digest how pandemics work. So much so that even the CDC has their own zombie preparedness guide that they put out, because they know that that's interesting to people. Because honestly, a lot of the things that you would do to deal with this sort of thing are actual preparedness techniques that you would deal with the pandemic. So I think that's why zombie films are so popular. But so I definitely wanted to settle on a zombie film, and I went with the most recent one that I thought deserved to be at the top of the list, and that is the South Korean masterpiece Train to Busan, which you can find on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
This movie is, I believe, the highest grossing South Korean movie of all time. It's broken a lot of records just in that country. I think it was their first ever attempt at a zombie film. And boy, did they knock it out of the park. It's very much an action film. It borrows a lot from the original George Romero films in the sense that this is a film that takes place, it's all in an isolated, contained locale, that being this train, very much in the way that the original Night of the Living Dead was. They were all trapped in this one farmhouse without really understanding what was going on in the outside world other than what they were hearing on the radio and what the people who were coming into the house were saying. That being said, it's a far cry from the days when zombies were just slow shambling. This is in the zombies subgenre of zombie films where they're very fast moving zombies and the infection spreads lightning quick.
Yeah.
Within a matter of minutes, you're full on ravenous flesh craving zombie.
Yeah.
From the moment you get bitten. At the heart, it's a story about a man and his daughter, his young daughter. He's getting a divorce from his wife. He's got custody of the child, but the child has no real connection to him, no real relationship to him. That's where our movie starts. He's a working man who has thrown himself into his career, who has neglected his family as a result, and he's reaping the consequences of that. And then while he's taking his daughter on this train trip to Busan to hand her off to the child's mother, that's when this sudden outbreak hits. And as the final door is closing for this trip, somebody infected gets on board. And that's where everything takes off from there. From that point on, it is really nonstop action. But at the same time, the thing I really appreciated is it has a great deal of heart to it. They never forget what the point of this movie is that this is just a father trying to protect his daughter at all costs, with the, rescinding all other considerations, including sometimes the people around him. There's a phrase that I like when it comes to artistic type of things, which is there is a certain majesty in simplicity, and the plot is very, very simple. There's a danger. This man is trying to keep his daughter safe. And there is also this big, huge outbreak happening, but you're only getting the story of these people who are in this one situation. And that makes it very intense and very effective. It gives them time to set up some very engaging characters. And you watch this plight over the course of the entire film. And as a lot of zombie movies end up going, you very quickly get the realization that not a whole lot of these people that you've spent this time getting to know are going to make it out of this. And that's always kind of a heartbreaking thing when you get invested in a character and realize, oh, all these people are going to die, or it's not going to turn out well, or, you don't really know what's going to happen, but it's a zombie film and people are getting swarmed left and right. So, but I think that's really effective storytelling when someone can make you care about the people who you are watching and then put them in danger and then get you really invested in the fate of each individual plot line that is following each of these characters, all of whom only have the connection of being trapped in the same place. But I would definitely encourage everybody to just go and watch this for yourselves. I've watched it a number of times now. It holds up every time I see it. It's one of the
In fact, I would say if you haven't seen it, this is a good point to pause this because it is available on Netflix. And the one, I know you're talking more about this, but I will say too, what I really enjoyed was it was a simple story. You got invested in the characters, but they also they were very specific to create arcs for the characters.
Yes.
Specifically, your main father, he's not a likable guy at the beginning.
He's not. He's really
at
not.
all.
He's very selfish.
Very selfish.
And he has to be, the daughter is the heart of the movie.
Yeah.
And
he's towing the company line.
Right. And she repeatedly has to kind of remind him to
You're
care
supposed
about
to care, but you're supposed to care
and
about
she
other
even
people.
says at one point, you only care about yourself.
Oh, and it's a heartbreaking moment too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I need to look up the name of that child actress actually, because
let me see if I can
what an
find it.
amazing job. I've got a lot of the information on this. It's directed by Yuan Sang-ho, And the actors are Gong Yu and Jung Yu Mi and Ma Dong Seok. I'm butchering these names, obviously.
The little girl's name is Kim Suan, and she's playing
Okay.
Suan in the movie. But that is her name.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was incredible. Little kid.
Everyone in this does a fantastic acting job.
Yes.
And something that I think really needs to be pointed out of this, it's a very specific thing when you're trying to portray this otherworldly monster or a walking corpse. Well, in this film, these infected zombies have not had time to decay at all. The infection works so fast, and they become these ravenous, like really fast, dangerous animals within moments of the infection. And it does tend to happen at a different rate depending on who it is. I think that's something that's done just for the narrative of certain characters. But one of the things that they really did well in this, and I think across the board, they hired people for their physicality, because the way these zombies move is almost difficult to watch because
it's completely unnatural.
It's very unnatural. They're contorting. You almost hear their bones cracking as they move, and
yet they're moving very quickly. It's like
very quickly.
Nothing in your movement is coordinated, and yet somehow
it's disturbing and unnatural and very effective. Very, very effective.
Yeah. I did a lot of behind the scenes, looked for a lot of behind the scenes stuff from the movie because I was so interested in what their whole process was with the physicality and some of the scenes where they had large numbers. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find what I was looking for. I really wanted to know whether they hired acrobats or if they were
contortionists.
Because I mean, these people are throwing, not only is their movement unnatural and fast, they're also like throwing themselves. And that, there's a lot of
amazing stunt work.
Yeah. There's a lot of CGI for the larger scenes, very well done CGI, but some of the times when these actors are throwing themselves around, it's not CGI. I mean, they're just flinging themselves all over the place,
writhing on the ground in ways that I would hurt my elbows.
Yes. Yeah, the closest I got to anything like that is there's a scene where there's the young baseball player.
Yes.
And he's with the girl. And there is a scene where they're running through the train yard and they're on gravel, and he tripped and fell.
And the gravel, yeah. I felt it.
And he was padded, but then he gets up a minute later and is like holding his elbow because he landed right above the padding.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I could find on kind of them flinging themselves around. I really wanted to, I'm going to keep looking. I was hoping to find it before today, but I want to find out more about their stunt actors and their supporting players, because I've never seen people do stuff like that in any American movie.
Yeah. And when they do add CGI to it, it's usually to create these bigger effects that they're building off of those smaller ones, that they're building off of the physical performance of their extras and their stunt performers. And when they build that into these huge swarms of humanity, it's like breaking through windows and falling off of buildings and rolling like a wave through a train car.
That moment.
It's insane.
The moment where you first see that big wave of them coming through the train car, it's completely convincing. When I watched it, I'm like, this has got to be CGI, right? There's no way they could do that with people, because it looked like it was people.
But it looks very seamless, yeah.
But you're right. It is. They did a really great job. I don't think anything was 100% CGI. I think everything, they used it to enhance the real performers that they had, and it's very effective.
Yeah.
One other thing that was very effective was the way they structured the scene in the movie where they make that first stop. They think they're okay.
Mm-hmm.
They get off the train. So there's the initial outbreak. They're able to kind of cordon them off and separate themselves from the infected, because each car has the doors and they don't know how to work the doors, and they figure out by trial and error that if they don't see you, they kind of go dormant. And so
a little weird,
darkness, But I mean, like, it's sort of like what you said about Pontypool.
It's establishing a rule.
Establishing a rule, so let's go with it. But what I thought was really cool was that by doing that and having them disembark, and then having them, they think there's militia there, and then they're all infected. So they're kind of coming down the stairs, and all of a sudden they see them, so they have to run back. And again, it's all so fast, right? So they're racing back. They lose some more of the people. But when the people that are the main kind of core of this group get back on the train and get going, they get on it, they get scattered, and they get into different parts of the train. So what I thought was so awesome, which I had never really seen before, was you have the father and the daughter are the main couple, and then I would say the other one is the couple with the pregnant wife, right?
Yes, yes.
And so the pregnant wife ends up with the daughter several cars towards the back, and the father and the husband are with a couple others.
Isn't it baseball player? Yeah,
it's like
baseball player.
9 cars or something. Was it that much?
Something like that.
They have to get through. Yeah,
they have to fight their way forward. Yeah,
exactly. And now we sometimes fight, and sometimes they have to be when they get on top of the luggage stuff,
yes,
and crawl across, like all that stuff to me was very intriguing. I actually liked the whole dormancy aspect. Maybe I mean, again, it's a rule, but they need light to activate everything and stimulate them. Yeah. And so when it went through tunnels, I thought that was really cool that they kind of went.
It was
down.
Great that there was a different tactic they had to employ for every car that they got to.
Exactly.
Correct.
I agree.
Really great plot construct. It's a great moment where the guy steps on the soda can.
Oh my God. Especially because you see the soda can right in front of his foot.
Yeah.
And the other guy's counting down, and you're like, no, I thought he was going to kick it, but he steps on it, You're like, oh,
and then
God.
that split second look of,
just run.
That guy, by the way, and I didn't go back to check, was he the guy in the very beginning scene that was driving the truck that ran over the animal? Or was that somebody else?
No, it's a different
guy. It's just a random guy who's okay. Yeah. I thought they were bringing that guy back.
Yeah.
But
now that you mention it, that was the one piece of pure CGI. Is a moment with the
dead animal,
but it was still.
Oh, they didn't actually kill an animal.
I meant the one getting up off the ground after it was supposed to be dead when it stood back up. But
I thought about that scene after the fact, though. I thought that maybe that was the symbolic. This was patient zero, that guy who came across the deer. But it didn't really touch him in any way. But he was going toward the plant that you later on find out that's probably where everything started because he was going into a quarantine area.
Our main guy worked for.
Yes. Yes. And that's another great thing. A part of his redemption arc is that you find out he's realizing that not only, he's been doing everything he's doing because he believes he's serving his family. He's estranged from his family because he's never with them and he's working so hard. He's justified it because what he's doing to provide for them. But then he finds out that his efforts are partly what caused this.
Yeah, I have to say, too, one of the things I loved at the very beginning, I thought it was such a great little bit, was he has his assistant buy his daughter a present, right?
Oh,
and he
God.
Over the present, she looks at it, it's a we, and she's not really excited. And he's like, "You're not excited?" And she just looks up, and there's another one.
He got one.
Yeah.
Same model. Same color.
Yeah.
It was perfect.
It was terrific.
He just bought it like 6 months ago or something.
Yeah.
I've recently, I've tried to look at this huge list that I compiled and say, well, what are the best pandemic movies of all time? I think if you're looking at that really specific culture, I do think Contagion deserves to be on that list. I think for being the big success it was, I think Outbreak deserves to be on that list. I think for, the problems that various movies have, they deserve to be on that list. Obviously, Romero's movies, they got weirder and weirder as he went along. A good zombie film, you shouldn't necessarily have to know what it is that's causing it, because what a zombie film is at its heart, and really a lot of these sort of infection movies, they're not so much about the grander scale of it. They're a study of the human condition. They're a study of how people behave in a crisis situation, about when you take away this thin veneer of civilization that we have built up around us, how quickly things will de-escalate or not. And that is something I think that's really important to point out in the current situation that we are in, because right now we are living out a pandemic movie. The COVID-19 is totally global. It's getting worse and worse by the day. The cases go up exponentially. It's a very terrifying time that we're living in. But what we are also discovering is that while a lot of the systems that we have always taken for granted are suddenly no longer there for us, there's a very different response happening right now than to what you would normally see in some of these sensationalized stories. People aren't turning on each other. They're doing really the opposite. You know, people are trying their best to lift each other up. They're spreading a lot of heartening messages. John Krasinski, for example, actor John Krasinski has started this wonderful thing where he's still just, you know, the Good News Network or whatever it is he's calling it. It's literally just him trying to spread some good news into the world, you know, for people's benefit. So I think we're seeing something that you're not going to see in a movie right now in the way it's really panning. And obviously we're pretty far from the end of this. This is something that we're going to deal with for a while. But, you know, it is comforting to know that while it is very popular in a movie to take away the social constructs that make people behave and show, oh, we're all just animals trying to survive, there's really more to it than that. There's more to humanity than that.
I have to wonder, though, if this was more severe and a faster acting, more desperate situation. I mean, we have seen people acting like asses in the grocery store over
absolutely
hoarding toilet paper or getting in fights about it. I think if it was one of those more contagion or outbreak type things and it was widespread, I sincerely believe that the majority of people would be decent human beings, but I think we would definitely be seeing a lot more looting, and I don't know that we'd be seeing the Mad Max kind of thing, but I agree with you that we have been seeing, by and large, what we've been seeing is a lot of decency.
To lift a quote from Men in Black, this is a quote that's been coming up a lot lately, actually, is Will Smith trying to convince Tommy Lee Jones's character that people are inherently good, to which Tommy Lee Jones, as, what's his name in that? It's MC, what is it? M. But he says that, no, a person is good. People are dumb, panicky animals, and you know it. So I think there's some inherent truth in that. That's what Train to Busan is about. It's about how people react.
Speaking of that, one of the things I liked is that I felt, you were talking about how the father, you're talking about both the arcs and that the father got redemption. I liked the fact that all of the characters who needed redemption got it.
The guy cowering in the bathroom going, they're all dead, they're all dead.
Yeah.
There were a lot of heroic sacrifices in this movie.
Exactly.
Well, there was one character that did not redeem himself.
I disagree.
I disagree. Oh, we have to discuss this now.
Okay.
It's not, right. I don't feel that I sort of disagree. I don't feel that he certainly did not redeem himself, but I feel that he got redemption.
We are talking about the businessman. Okay.
The businessman spends the entire movie only being concerned for himself to the point of sacrificing people. But when he turns, he becomes his core person who is a scared child. And all he wants is his mommy. For me, at least, I realized, oh, that's why he's been acting this way this whole time.
Because he's
not that he's evil. He is a scared child. And
it explained him. I think
it explained him. It does not redeem him.
I felt sympathy for him for the first time.
You know who I felt the saddest for was really that train conductor, the guy who was driving the train the entire time. Because he spent so much time just trying to protect his payload, which was his passengers, that he's completely oblivious to all the power dynamics that are happening amongst the characters, and that ends up being his downfall in the end. He's just trying to save one of these guys who's running after him because that's one of the people he's supposed to be protecting. Completely oblivious to the fact that I know this guy is an opportunist who will kill you the moment he gets the chance in the name of saving himself. And sadly, that's what happens.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, that's just it. It's like, again, I agree. It explained him better, but I mean, he just killed so many people.
Oh, he was horrible. I don't forgive him.
I mean, he literally, the one where the young couple with they're sitting there and he comes out and just totally throws a young girl off to get bit.
Well, not only that, but when he's stuck in the bathroom with the conductor, and he
shoves him out the door.
He looks out and he sees all the zombies, and the guys are like, "Are they gone?" He's like, "Yeah, you go first." Shove, and then he's a piece of shit. But just the way they ended him, I liked what they did with that. They did not make him simply this mustache twirling evil guy.
So they gave him, there were no one-dimensional characters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I will say that what they did at the end, because he was the character that was the most formulaic all the way through until that point, where you went, oh yeah, he's just a scared little boy. So again, it gave him depth.
Yes.
And so that's, again, another thing that they just did really, really well. So I would agree with you on that. I love that they did that. I'm still an ass. And I was texting you guys on that text string, and I was like real time, I'm like, oh man, this businessman,
I was getting a whole
pissing
different
me
level
off.
of enjoyment because of that.
Yeah, and you guys like, just wait. Or I'm not saying anything, and I'm like, oh man, it gets worse, and it kept getting worse.
It was a lot of fun reliving the movie vicariously through your text messages
Yes, it was.
as you were watching it.
so good.
I love just a lot of the way that it was filmed, the choices the director made. If you look at, I think it may be on the screen image for the movie on Netflix, or I saw it someplace where you see the father right before he sacrifices himself at the end. He's standing, you see him, and his body has already started to fall. So you see him falling off the train, and I'm watching the movie expecting to see that, and they don't do that. You see him standing there, and then you just see the shadow of the train and the shadow of the man, and the shadow just falls off. And I was like,
Beautifully directed.
That was just,
directed.
we didn't need to, I mean, that spoke so much more than seeing him fall.
Yeah. It's like the symbolism of like, he's already gone.
Yeah.
The reflection is still there, and his flashback sequence when he's going.
Yeah, I like that they also, as they're turning, and I think you said it earlier, Steve, that they, the rate at which they turn differed for narrative purposes, whatever. I mean, that's fine. But that there was still a little bit of them still there, even as they're, because it was like even the businessman, the old lady couple or whatever they were.
Sisters, yeah.
So the one, you could tell she was right before that one girl opened the thing, the one that had turned, she looked like she kind of had recognition of her still.
Yeah, yeah.
So there was a lot of that I thought was really interesting. One thing I also want to make sure I mention. So you were saying that the shot of you kept saying, you mentioned the wave of them. You're talking about in the car, right?
Yes.
In the train car.
Yeah.
Towards the beginning when it first starts happening.
Right after the male steward changes, after he gets attacked by the other one, where he changes
Mm-hmm.
and he starts coming down the aisle, and they got that beautiful zombie cam of him as he's coming forward. And then you see the wave of people come up behind him. That's
wonderfully
incredible.
directed.
This is fantastic. Now, the other one that I thought that's what you were talking about, but I would say was even more impressive to me was towards the end when the father and the daughter and the pregnant woman get to that other train, and they start
they're
chasing
dragging
after
them behind,
and they're dragging them, and they create this chain of bodies.
Yeah,
that people that the other ones can they almost use each other to climb on top. There was one shot that was like an above shot down of that, and it was, oh my gosh,
it was like 3 train cars long and like people. 2 train cars wide.
And when it finally breaks, you see them all like breaking like a wave crashing.
Yes, and tumbling over each other.
I'd love to know how they filmed that.
Yeah,
incredible.
Really well
Again, I think it was what Steve was saying, is that it started out with actors and then they built on that with CGI. It definitely was CGI ultimately, but it's so.
Or even in the train station when they finally all break through the windows that they're trying to hold them back, and it's just, they finally let it go and they just all come crashing through in this unbelievably huge pile of people.
It was incredible.
Very effective.
So good. So good.
Just that moment where you mentioned before, where they get to that first station where the military is there and it's supposed to be locked down, and they're coming down the stairs, and you see all these soldiers, just this huge number, like 100 or more soldiers,
and you just know
what's standing
coming.
There, and somebody makes a noise, and they turn around, and the second they turn around, they just attack, and it's just this huge. I know they're zombies, but you're still like, they're military, so even when you're not thinking, they're probably got to be more dangerous than just like your average guy.
They're recently turned and physically fit.
Yes, and as they run up, it's just amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I was ready to declare this one of the best zombie movies of all time.
I will. For me, I would put it at the top of the list. I can't think of any that does the zombies and the story and the characters and the filming.
I think most critics are always going to side on George Romero's original Night of the Living Dead as the greatest, but
I would say it's the most might be the most important, but
it defined the genre for sure.
Did.
But I think this one finally elevated it to an art form that has shown us what it should be.
I cannot think of anything in it that I would call a weakness.
Did anybody else cry like a little child when the girl is singing in the tunnel
Oh
at the
my
very end?
So good.
And that was such a good, I mean, tying things together that
Yeah.
she had not.
She never got the chance to perform it. She never got the chance
And
to
that's the
perform
thing.
it for him.
It's actually, I've got little goosebumps now that she said she couldn't finish singing
Yeah.
because he
That's why
wasn't
she
there.
stopped.
Because he wasn't there.
And then at the end, she finishes singing because he's not there.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
Beautiful
oh
bookend.
my God.
Beautiful
Oh my
bookend.
God.
And because of the tension that they built up to the whole movie and establishing that anybody could go, they're coming through the tunnel. You have the other side. You have actual military. And guys like, have they turned? I can't tell. And then the guy says, all right,
Go
kill
and
him.
kill him. Yeah.
And yeah, I'm thinking they're going to kill these two. That's how this type of movie, I could see it ending that way.
Speaking of Night of the Living Dead, that's how Night of the Living Dead did end. Nobody
Yeah.
made it out alive.
Yeah.
So emotional.
Yeah, and that I wasn't expecting. I wasn't expecting the tearjerker. I was not expecting to be so emotionally invested in a zombie action horror film. Nailed the heart.
And you know,
I
the other
agree.
thing that speaks to how good this film is, Dave, when we were talking about, me, I don't like being able to figure things out and stuff. I was so invested. I didn't have a moment. It never even occurred to me to try to think about what's going to happen.
That's true.
I mean, if it had been a different movie and not presented as well, I absolutely would have gone, oh, okay, well, this is the big lovable guy who's got a kid coming and he's super strong. He's going to die.
Yeah.
Didn't even occur to me. Did not occur to me until he got bitten. And I was like, oh, shit.
Yeah.
Now he's going to die.
Yeah.
Went out like a boss, though.
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. It's an amazing movie.
It's a masterpiece. True
Yeah.
masterpiece.
Yeah. Yeah. Very well done. Good choice, sir.
Now, of course, we know there's a sequel coming out.
I'm skeptical, but optimistic.
Train to Busan presents Peninsula.
Yes.
I'm a little worried because it looks like I'm hoping it's not going to suffer the now we have a big budget
It
effect
looks like
that so many
it
movies.
could be like 4 times the budget of what.
And it looks like I'm hoping that I mean it looks like it's a big action movie. It's not all in one place.
The only thing I would say that might save it is that it's taking a completely different direction because it's in years in the future and it's post-apocalyptic, and so it's almost got a Mad Max feeling to it. Maybe that's going to work in its favor to be different because if they were just to try to recreate it like now it's on a boat or
No, that would be horrible.
like on an ocean liner or something.
I'm hoping it's going to be Road Warrior following Mad Max, not Thunderdome following Road Warrior.
That's a good analogy, actually. I'm encouraged by the fact that it's a different story, that they're just telling something different in the same world.
Yeah.
So this is why I'm optimistic. The only reason I'm skeptical really is that the first one sets such a high bar.
Exactly.
All right. So as we're finishing up here, I think this was a good start to what we're looking to do. Thanks for listening. We had fun for sure. Again, I'm Dave Wright.
I'm Stephon Walker.
I'm Steve Winall.
And we'll catch you next time.